This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your friend with a pussy magnet.
Welcome, my lovely lumps. Or should I say lovely labs? I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge to yarn about all things sexuality, womanhood, holistic health, and everything in between. Your legs. Can never help myself. Anyway, we're going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up. You're about to receive the sex ed that you never had and have a bloody good laugh while you're at it. Before we get stuck in, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this, the Menang people. It's an absolute privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content on Noongar country, and I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if you're all ready, let's flap and do this. Oh God, is there such thing as too many vagina jokes in the one intro? Whatever, I'm leaving it in. It's my podcast.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up the couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
Hey, labial loonies. Happy Menopause Awareness Month. At least I hope I'll be able to get my shit together in time to release this while it's still within the month. But today, in recognition of this, I'm doing another menopause-focused epi, and I've got my dear friend and Labia Lounge's resident Chinese med practitioner and women's health specialist, Joanna McMeikan, with me today to shed some light and give some helpful tips and insights. So welcome back, Joanna.
Thank you for having me. I love your podcast. I love everything about it.
I love having you. What is this, the third time you've been on?
I think so. Labia Lounge.
Ooh.
Ho.
Totally. Such a pro. You're like alumni, whatever. Is that even the correct use of that word? It's so American, I don't even know.
I guess that's when you graduate out of something.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you're like an honorary member. You've been on so many times. Anyway, so to just prep everyone, I would highly recommend going back and listening to my other episodes surrounding this topic because they're absolute rippers. If you haven't heard them, scroll back, find one called Your Sex Life Isn't Over Once You Hit Menopause with Heidi True. And then there's another epic episode with Jane Hardwick Collins called Menopause, A Misunderstood Mystery. And in those episodes, we cover more about, the emotional and the energetic aspects of menopause and peri-menopause and how we navigate the transitions and work with these stages rather than against them. We talk about the attitudes towards menopause and the beliefs and narratives that kind of cause us to dread and revile, this really potent rite of passage that it actually can be. And so, we reframe how to see and understand menopause. We debunk a bunch of myths about it, including about libido and sex. And they're some of my favorite episodes. So yeah, they'll provide a really great basis of knowledge and understanding, which we're going to kind of assume today that you've already got, because we're going to dive in today's episode to more like the physical aspects, what's happening inside your body hormonally with your liver, your nervous system. We'll chat about some practical methods of managing the changes that your body goes through so that it doesn't have to be just this negative or challenging experience that it kind of gets marketed as, or at least minimize some of the more unpleasant parts that can occur and understand them better. So we're also going to chat about how menopause can impact your relationships and partnerships, and then how to navigate this, especially in a marriage. And whatever else comes up. So yeah, does that sound like a bit of a vibe, Jojo?
It does sound like a vibe. And I would say, more than a recommendation, like you have to go and listen to those other episodes because they were actually, I reached out to you about this topic. And that was kind of what you covered really in the podcast with Jane was what I wanted to talk about. And so when you said, yeah, let's hook it up, I thought I'll go and check out what you guys have already spoken about and catch up on a few episodes that I was behind on. And when I listened to it, it was such a perfect episode. You guys covered it so beautifully. Jane's like such a fountain of knowledge in that area.
Yeah.
And so I think before you listen to this one, you need to go back and listen to it because everybody needs to listen to that one anyway. and then, yeah, when I was thinking, all right, well, given that the groundwork has been covered, which we'll touch on, I mean, we will touch on briefly kind of the core of the reframe around menopause, but then this episode we can talk more about practical strategies.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, nice. I was totally riddled with goosebumps for like most of my chat with Jane. It was just such an epic episode, and yeah, she's pretty incredible. I was very like, oh my God, she agreed to be on my podcast. So yeah, definitely listen to that, you suckers. All right, so before we get into the practical tactics and strategies, I'd love you to share quickly about what you told me from Chinese medicine perspective, like around menopause being the second spring, because like I really loved that, and it's worth mentioning because it really aligns with the views that are put forward in those other 2 menopause episodes.
Yeah, I think Jane actually mentions it specifically. So the second spring is this idea, it's not that cryptic, that puberty is the first spring, right? So you go from being a little girl and you blossom like the flowers do in spring into a woman. And in fact, the menstrual blood in Chinese medicine, it's called the Tiangui, I think, which is probably a terrible pronunciation, but it translates as heavenly waters. So it has like a really spiritual understanding, a really spiritual sort of meaning as well. It's not just, it's not considered blood in the same way that we consider, blood in the rest of the body. So it's this idea that puberty is this special time, this transitional time, and so too is menopause. And it's given the honor of being the opportunity for a woman to return back to herself. And I think, again, Jane talked about it in the other episode, that estrogen is the hormone of, I think she said service and sacrifice. Is that what do you remember? That,
something
that
like
gives
that,
something like that. That estrogen is the hormone of service and sacrifice. And the reason that it provides the motivation to do that is because being in a family unit is good for our species, survival of the species. It's also richly rewarding, having children and nurturing and being in a family. But there comes a time where your children grow up and don't need you in that capacity anymore. And then all of that emotional energy, physical energy, everything that you've been putting back into the family, child rearing, I want to say like keeping the hearth fires burning, but obviously I'm not pigeonholing people into traditional gender roles or anything there. But that whole mothering aspect, you're able to then come back around and sort of turn that energy back to yourself and be like, oh yeah, I had hobbies. What were the hobbies that I used to want to do? And you have an opportunity to then live. We talk as well about the 3 stages. So you've got like the little girl, and then you become a woman, and then you become a wise woman. And there's sort of 3/3 of your life. And that final third, you can go into that with all of the knowledge and wisdom gained in the first 2/3. So really the third innings can be like the best yet. But we have this cultural narrative that after 30, it's all downhill.
Line and decay.
Yeah. And interestingly, Chinese medicine talks about, it's based on yin and yang. And so men are more yang to begin with. Yang pertains to the masculine, and women are more yin to begin with. And so as you start to decline in these 2 vital essences, men will show more signs of yang deficiency and women will show more signs of yin deficiency. And so that's where that kind of this idea of dryness comes into it, because yin relates to the fluids and the blood and nighttime and the moon. And it's, this is where we do sort of see these signs of yin deficiency in women, with drying of the skin, drying of the hair, hot flushing, drying of the tissues. But it's not a fait accompli. It doesn't mean that, once you hit 30, you just dried up, sad old woman ready to be put out on the trash heap, which I think, is kind of the predominant message in our culture. And it really pisses me off. And that's why I really liked that episode with you and Jane, because I was just listening to it. I was like, yes, what she says.
Totally. Yeah, cool. Okay, so then you also described it as like the second puberty. Is that good?
Reverse
Oh no,
puberty.
not the second puberty. Yeah. Yeah,
That's my
reverse
nickname
puberty.
for it, reverse puberty. Because I think if we saw it as a reverse puberty, that's again, it's trying to find ways that people can reframe in their mind. Because when you go through puberty, no one's like, oh gosh, they're not a little girl anymore. How terrible. They must be useless, you know? So what's happening through menopause is you're just transitioning out of that fertile time in your life. And the other thing is we give teenagers and, you know, pubertal beings, we give them a bit of grace. You know, we're like, oh, you know what teenagers are like. If they're snappy or ragey or moody or depressed, we're like, yeah, you know, puberty's hard. Like, it's a lot going on
Puberty
there.
blues.
Yeah, 100%. So we have this like innate understanding that teenagers and pubertal beings need some support and need some grace and need some kindness. Doesn't give them carte blanche permission to be a jerk, but you know, we do sort of tend to recognize that there's a lot of upheaval going on. And so when you categorize menopause and perimenopause and menopause as this reverse puberty, it sort of is like you realize it's the same sort of thing. It's just the other end of that journey. So, you know, women really do find themselves returning in a lot. Some women, well, I'm not going to say everybody, because some women just sail through, you know, like they don't get any symptoms. It's really easy. You know, it's certainly not everybody's journey, but not all women. So those that do experience signs and symptoms during I'm rambling now, but Jane said another really good thing, which was she didn't like this word symptoms. So I'm trying to change my language around that, because she's right. It's not a symptom of menopause. It's an experience of menopause, because menopause isn't a disease. It's a natural process that it looks like we evolved into. And again, I'll touch on what Jane spoke about, because it's something I talk about a lot in clinic, is that there are two ways of looking at menopause. And I think a lot of the doctors that are out there promoting modern day hormone replacement therapy, which is called MHT or menopausal hormone therapy, also called bioidentical hormone therapy or body identical hormone therapy. It's no wonder people are confused. But they sort of talk about it in the way of their feelings towards menopause are that we are now living longer only because of modern medicine. So we're going through our menopause earlier and we're living longer. So when you speak to some of the doctors, they're like, well, we would be dead, you know, by our 50s. You menstruate right up until your 50s, and then your average life expectancy was only about then anyway. So you'd be dead and you wouldn't have to worry about menopause. So they consider that menopause is this modern condition that we have purely because Western medicine is keeping us alive longer. No, I don't really agree with that. Yeah, because I think we can find evidence of menopause in plenty of cultures before modern medicine was what it is today. And so it looks, if you speak then to the evolutionary biologists, it looks as though we evolved into menopause because the species did better when we were supported by the wisdom of the elder women. And Jane talks about, you know, the whales, it's us and the whales go through menopause. And they found that the whale pods where those matriarchal whales that were no longer reproducing, they became leaders in the whale pods, and then those whale pods did better. And so there's an evolutionary advantage, who'd have thought, to having wise women in leadership roles.
Yeah, so beautiful. And yeah, I like that. It's tricky to stop saying, I kept sort of wanting to say like symptoms, but then I'm like, hang on a sec, it's not even symptoms of menopause so much as of lifestyle factors. Like a lot of the things that people see as symptoms that that menopause is responsible for, actually, like you said, some women sail through. And like my mum, you know, she was just super healthy, exercised a lot, eats really well. She had such a chill time. And there weren't a lot of those symptoms because her lifestyle was supporting, you know, healthy liver, healthy nervous system, all of this. And so I feel like they're more lifestyle factors that are creating symptoms that then menopause, you know, gets blamed for. Just because, we can't get away with having certain lifestyle factors anymore because we're not young and we don't have the hormonal support to just sort of like, I guess get through some kind of not so healthy behaviors. How do you feel about that?
Oh, there's a whole lot of bullshit you can pull in your 20s and 30s that you cannot get away with in your 40s. And I think that's another thing that I talk about in my work is that, you know, your hormonal health really is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I think there is some evidence to suggest that ovulation, when I talk about this stuff now, because I've been in the work for so long, same as you, I feel like every sentence that I say should just have like on the end of it because it's so obvious. But who would have thought?
Not to everyone.
Yeah, but who would have thought that regular healthy ovulation and exposure to your body's naturally cycling hormones would have a benefit to you over the lifespan? We're seeing that women who have who've been on the pill, for example, it's likely that they will have a rougher time heading into menopause than someone who's never been on the pill because they didn't have that disruption to their natural hormones and they had the beneficial exposure to progesterone for longer, which seems to ease the transition into menopause. So, yeah, the way we talk about women's bodies has been so medicalized. It's frustrating, but yeah, you need to. It's difficult in my line of work to get a 20-year-old interested in her hormonal health because it'll make an easier transition to menopause. You know, like it's not really relevant. She's looking to get rid of migraines or breast pain or really heavy periods or maybe she wants to control, I'm doing air quotes, control when her period is coming because she's traveling. You know, I know plenty of young girls that were on the pill and they're like, oh, I'm just going to skip my period this month because I'm going to Thailand. I'm like, first of all, it's not a period. So it's very difficult to kind of get that message to land because I don't know about you, but when I was 20, I thought 40 was basically dead. And now that I'm 42, I'm like, oh.
Oh, totally.
So everything that we do on a day-to-day basis is having an impact on the future us, hormonally speaking, but of course everything speaking, but hormonally speaking, there's a really strong connection there. So one of the ways, probably what helped your mum have such a smooth transition is that she was going in with hormones that were relatively stable in the way they interplayed. You know, that interplay was set up in the right ratio so that when everything inevitably dropped, it's dropping in the right ratio. Like, I'm doing like hand movements that listeners can't see, but, you know, if you've got one hand sitting on top of the other and that's estrogen and that's progesterone, when the total levels drop, the ratio kind of remains the same, similar. So the relative fluctuation is not felt as drastically as if you already have sky-high estrogen. I've just made my hands bigger apart. And then the estrogen remains stable, but the progesterone drops, which is step one in menopause. So now I've got this big gap between my hands. And then what else can happen in menopause is the estrogen can elevate. So now I've got one hand way up above my head and the other one's down, you know, near my belly button. So it's important to go into that menopausal transition with things in the right sort of ratios to try and smooth out that reverse puberty ride that we get.
Totally. Yeah. And, you know, my mum never took the pill or anything like that. If you guys haven't listened to the other episode Joanna and I did about the contraceptive pill, go back and listen to that. You got heaps of homework for this one. There's a lot of like prerequisite learning. But yeah, that pill episode was fucking kick-ass and just, yeah, so jam-packed with really relevant stuff. And it's all very interconnected, you know, and Jane talks about this. It's like each transitional stage is a rite of passage, and the way that you kind of the way that you cycle through your menstrual cycle, the way that you give birth, the way that you go through menopause, they're all very connected. And it's so tough to get people invested in. It's like that classic experiment where like, you're like, do you want one M&M now or like 5 M&Ms in 10 minutes? And everyone's like, give me the M&M now. And it's like, yeah, we just don't give a fuck. It's a bit of a like, you know, I'll sleep when I'm dead attitude. It's like, we're invincible, we're young, we can get away with like fucking our bodies sideways at this age and we'll deal with it later. And like, as you get older, you start just like, I'm getting this rising sense of panic that I like didn't do the right thing and I'm not able to get away with it anymore. And I'm just like, okay, like really have, and I've been pretty bloody healthy, honestly. I'm very grateful with myself for the fact that I've always been quite health focused and quite invested in my health. I never, you know, really burnt the candle at both ends or had a huge like bender drug taking phase or anything. I've always been quite responsible, but still there's a lot of things that, you know, even right now that I'm thinking, fuck, I really, really should be doing better at, because I'll know about it. I mean, I'm already feeling it. So yeah. And just like taking care of your body and doing protective things now that are really going to ease your transition later. Super important, but difficult to care about when it's not like relevant to you immediately, you know?
But I think that you just segued really nicely into, I made some notes for this episode because I know you and I tend to like, woo, just ride the wave of free-flowing conversation. So I made some notes to keep myself honest. And that's something that I wanted to talk about, which is that the skills that we should start chatting about now in terms of regulating that nervous system and how to look after your liver, they're skills that you learn now, or you learn them when you learn them. And I think, you know, you could always look back and be like, oh, I could have done that better. And it's interesting hearing you say, I didn't, you know, I wasn't on the pill for long, or I didn't have a big party. So I did, and I was, you know, I committed to that shit. So, you know, but I can't change that. And that will have had the impact that it has had. What I also have are some very good stories to tell, right? So I don't regret any of the things that I've done in life, because I wouldn't be who I am without them. So I think it's not a super helpful path. And if your listeners are thinking, oh my God, I've been on the pill for 15 years and I'm doomed, it doesn't work like that, first of all, because you hear, in that episode on the pill, we talked a lot about some of the things that can go wrong. But equally, I know people who were on the pill. I'm one of them. I was on the pill for 10 years, came off the pill, got my period immediately on the next full moon, and still had a very light period. So stupid me was like, oh, well, you know, I probably don't have a healthy enough cycle to nourish a developing fetus at this point, so I'll need to work on fertility. And as a consequence, wasn't super careful with contraception with my now husband, but that's how my first child was conceived. So, you know, we do talk about it can go wrong, and it does, and I see plenty of that in clinic, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that you've signed this certificate in blood, you know, if you've done these things in the past. So, but the important thing for nervous system work is it's a practice, it's a skill, like so many other things. And it's better to learn and develop those skills, find out what you enjoy doing, find out what works for you, and begin to perfect, I don't want to say perfect them, but nothing in life is perfect, begin to improve them and gain those skills when shit is not going sideways. Because once you are in the thick of it, learning to sit and meditate is going to be the last thing you want to do, you know, because it's hard even when things are fine. Meditation makes you crazier before it makes you calmer. So with nervous system training, and I guess we can kick off talking about meditation because that's one of the most common ones. I don't
and
think
just to give context, this is related to menopause, because this is like a really great kind of practice to be in to manage nervous system stuff which is impacted in menopause.
Yeah, so I think, again, listen to the other episodes. But what happens in your body during menopause is your ovaries, which have been responsible for the majority of your reproductive hormone production, they go into retirement. So they're like, this is what perimenopause is. They're basically knowing that they're about to retire. So they're spending most of their days at the office searching the internet for like good retirement destinations. How much can I live on each month in Cabo, Mexico? You know, they're looking up crochet patterns on the internet, and the boss, which is the brain, is like, hey, I want that report. I need that report. That boss just wants them to keep working the way that they used to work. And the ovaries are like, oh, you know, I'm nearly going to retire, right? So some months they'll work and they'll produce the hormones in the right levels, and then, you know, you can ovulate and get a period. And other months they're like, just talk to the adrenal system. You know, talk to the cells. They can synthesize their own estrogen. I'm leaving. So once you do go through menopause and your ovaries go into retirement, your body will take over production of estrogen, but in a lot lower levels. Is that English? At lower levels than the ovaries used to produce. But your adrenal system will, aka nervous system, will take over, and the the cells of your body learn to synthesize their own estrogen as well, which means they make their own estrogen. So let's say you have receptors for estrogen all over your body. And this is part of the reason why you do get these experiences in menopause of dry eyes, achy joints, for example, because you have cells with receptor sites for estrogen in your eyes and in your joints. And when they don't get their fix, that's when you get these indications where they are ultimately able to learn how to produce their own, but they're not doing it yet. So if your nervous system is busy punching out cortisol because you're stressed, you're not managing your stress, you're not learning how to move between a stressed state and into a not stressed state. So there's that flexibility. You don't want to turn your nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system off, because we have stress all day, every day in our life, and it's not even necessarily negative stress. And again, we talked about that on the pill episode. Stress is sort of framed as a negative thing, but it's not. It can be a very helpful thing. But the ability to move from that nervous system state into the parasympathetic, more calm state easily and at will is what you can train. And meditation is one really quick way that you can do that. And then for people that don't like meditation, there's some incredibly nifty breath work that's around these days, which my very favorite one, which I teach to everyone, is the 4-7-8 breathing technique. So if you need to give your nervous system a break from churning out stress hormones so that it can think about producing estrogen, then a really good way to do that is to have this breathwork practice. And 4-7-8 breathing is really simple. It's just you inhale for a count of 4, hold your breath for a count of 7, and then you exhale audibly, sort of constricting the back of your throat for a count of 8. So it sounds like someone I know who teaches it in the context of Tantra. She calls it sexy Darth Vader breathing. It goes, so in through your nose, hold, and then, that kind of.
I can't hear that
Darth
in the mic.
Vader. Oh, you
Like
can't hear it?
Ujjayi breath, like in yoga, they would call it Ujjayi breath, like oceanic breath, where that back of the throat's constricted slightly. So it's just a little bit more like, yeah, I mean, it sounds like Darth Vader. Is that kind of what we're going for?
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, and that audible constriction at the back of the throat is really important. So if you've never done any breath work before, you can start with 4-4-4.
Lungs?
So you go in for a count. That's called box breathing. So you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then hold for 4, and then inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. And again, with any skill, you start small, you build up. Maybe you only want to do 1 or 2 rounds of it because you don't want to wind up feeling lightheaded or passing out. Don't do it while you're driving, while you're learning about it. But I think there isn't really a hack for meditation. People have to talk about meditation hacks, and I think it's not something you can replace. But it's also difficult for people who have busy lives, and this is another thing that we're going to cover in this conversation, is when you're in your 40s, you've got kids, you've got a job, you've got parents that are starting to get older, you've got friends, and tragedy starts to come into your life. I lost a very good friend of mine. Her husband was tragically killed last week in a car accident. These things sort of start happening in your 40s. People get diagnosed with cancer, and so there's all this stuff going on, and it can be very difficult to sit down and be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to learn meditation now. But if you've got this simple technique, it's sort of a next best thing, I think. Do you have any favorite nervous system tools that you like to use?
Hey, Babe Towns. So sorry to interrupt, but I simply had to pop my head into the lounge here and mention another virtual lounge that you've got to get around. It's the Labia Lounge Facebook group that I've created for listeners of the potty to mingle in. And there you'll find extra bits and bobs like freebies or discounts for offerings from guests who've been interviewed on the podcast, inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, and support from a community of labial legends. So head over to the links in the show notes and I'll hopefully see you in there. And now, back to the episode.
I think little moments of breath work when I'm feeling super agitated or I'm recognizing that I'm like pretty dysregulated. I just love a bit of yoga. I love a bit of massage. I love like walking in nature or a swim in a natural body of water. Like all of those things are pretty great for the nervous system, but it just depends what you have access to day to day. So I feel like the most accessible one and easy, quick, people can do it anywhere is like either breath work or meditation. I find it fucking hard to stick to a meditation practice, but I think like you're saying, like it's important to get into the habit and have these practices established before shit hits the fan and you really need them. And that's kind of like everyone's always saying that. It's like establish the habits and, you know, be familiar with these practices before you think you need them. Because when you need them, you are not going to have the spoons to bring a new habit or establish a new practice. You know, you'll be in survival mode.
Behind me. A really good, and this is what I do. A lot of my work is actually workshopping with the women that come to me. How can we make it fit your life? Because I love on like Instagram and you see a 20-year-old influencer, health influencer. No, I'm not throwing shade either. I think it's great. But she's like, I do slow mornings. And I'm like, no, that's cute. Like,
you don't have kids, babe.
My version of a slow morning is if my daughter, who wakes up every morning on the stroke of 6, if she sleeps in till 10 past 6 before she kicks my door in and walks in fully dressed, like halfway through a conversation, she's a morning person, which is great. But yeah, so car meditation is one that I've come up with in my work, which is where you're always – I really like work in the car because I think people feel that their car is their safe space. It's a really it's nice and it's a small environment. You've got your tunes pumping, you know, like people feel quite happy and safe in their cars. So one thing you can do before when you're transitioning, so transitioning in and out of work, so it doesn't even have to be kid related. A lot of people, I'll talk to them about getting home from the office. And before you walk in the door and then your partner's like, hey, how was your day? And you're like, just give me a minute. And then a fight ensues. You take that minute in your car. You just put one song on. It doesn't even have to be like pan flutes and whales. It can be anything, any song that you like, right? It's better if it's more relaxing than, you know, we don't really want Friends Will Rom or anything going on. But it can just be a nice song that makes you happy. And for the duration of that song, breathe in through your nose, hold, breathe out, repeat, just for the duration of that song. And then before you know it, you're doing 5 minutes of meditation a day. And then you'll be like, oh, wow, I feel really good after that. And then that motivates you. So on the way to work, before you get out of your car and go into the office, you do a car meditation. And then if after you have a stressful meeting and you go back to the office, and now we're all, you know, a lot of people are still working from home, but before you leave the office part of your house and go into the main part of your house, pop a song on. Car meditation.
Totally. Yeah, I love a bit of a body scan as well, like just a bit of a like getting somatically aware of the different parts of my body, and that kind of helps just draw my focus and attention inwards, and that can be quite calming for the nervous system. So, okay, beautiful. What are some other things that, you know, we can do to, I don't want to say combat, but like work with and navigate the physical changes that are happening in our body to kind of just like make it more of a smooth experience?
I'm checking my notes. So yeah, we had with nervous system training, you mentioned all the kind of other ones I had behind breathwork. I would say if you had to pick one, if people are like, I don't have time for all these things, what's the most important one? I would say breathwork, because as you say, it's something that you can do anywhere. But journaling, also very good if that floats your boat. Exercise, of course. Oh, what I say, breathwork over exercise. I consider exercise a separate category.
And you're kind of breathing more deeply when you exercise anyway, you know, like they can.
Well, that depends if you know how to breathe diaphragmatically. You'd be surprised the number of people I have to consult with who don't know how to breathe diaphragmatically. So they're exercising and they're only breathing into their chest. So, because a lot of people are so tight through their thoracics, intercostalis. Yeah. Because we do that shallow, nervous breathing that you do when you're in fight or flight. So yeah, no, I stand by breathwork. Breathwork will improve all areas of your life. So start with that breathwork practice. Start practicing car meditation and or 4-7-8 breathing. I mean, you can do 4-7-8 breathing as your car meditation. And then I think I'd like to talk about insulin resistance because that's a really important one, particularly in perimenopause, because we naturally become more insulin resistant during that time. And there are some things that you can do to help combat that, which are just lifestyle changes. So one of the big things in perimenopause that I think people say, the top three in perimenopause and menopause, when I say what do you find hardest, is weight gain, hot flushes, and insomnia tend to be the top three that I hear about.
Okay.
And I think of all of those, weight gain has the most negative emotion associated with it. And a lot of the time, this is due to that insulin resistance that develops. So some practical
Why
tips.
does that develop? Why is there more insulin resistance in perimenopause and menopause?
Estrogen, I'm just going to say simply because you know what a nerd I am and it can get very complicated very quickly. There's the way, estrogen kind of helps with glucose uptake in the liver and so the very broad answer to that is it's down to the declining levels of estrogen yet again. And I'm sure if an immunologist was listening, they'd be like, it's more complicated than that. And it is. And that's why we'll just say it's down to the hormonal fluctuations yet again. Estrogen is a heavy hitter in the body. It's referred to as chocolate for the brain by some specialists. Like the brain loves estrogen so much. Yeah, it's like chocolate for the brain. Yeah. So insulin resistance very quickly for people that aren't super familiar with it is when you eat something as part of that digestive process, your pancreas has to secrete insulin to keep your blood sugar at a stable level. And if anybody has a diabetic friend, then they'll know that if your blood sugar is not stable, or if your blood sugar climbs dangerously high, you can actually die. You can go into a coma and die. So it's a big deal. That's why diabetics have to have, medication and insulin otherwise they'll die. So when you are insulin resistant, your pancreas is secreting insulin, but your body's not kind of registered, it's not really able to uptake and use the insulin in the way that it used to. So then your pancreas starts pumping out more and more of it, and then this can lead to pretty significant issues unchecked. One of them is weight gain. Of course, the kicker is not everybody who is insulin resistant has weight gain, and not everybody who is gaining weight has insulin resistance, of course, but it is very common. And left untreated and unmanaged, it can progress into quite serious conditions like cardiovascular disease. And so it is something that you want to be aware of. And you can check it on a blood test. Your doctor or functional medicine practitioner will be able to check fasting blood glucose, and they'll also take a look at something called HbA1c. So but is it, and
this might be totally off base, is it kind of safe to say that in menopause the weight gain is most commonly due to insulin resistance, or is there a whole lot of other factors that are kind of creating a predisposition towards weight gain in menopause?
It's very common. I'll say that insulin resistance is a very common driver of that weight gain, but it's not the only thing. So as we age, we're losing a percentage of our muscle mass year on year, the older we get, which is why weight training is super important, and we'll talk about that as well. Again, just as there's no downside to meditation, there is no downside to learning to lift weights and doing weight-bearing exercise. But you start to lose your muscle mass, and that means that because lean muscle burns more calories at rest than adipose tissue or fat tissue. So if you and I both weigh 65 kilos, or if you weigh 60 kilos and I weigh 70 kilos, but I have more muscle mass, I will be burning more calories at rest than you who has less muscle mass. So preserving muscle mass is important. That starts to decline, and you guessed it, because estrogen is anabolic, so it helps us to build muscle. So as the estrogen declines, we start to lose that muscle. So we need to be preserving it by eating enough protein and doing resistance training and some form of exercise. So that factors in as well. And that's not just for women. Age-related metabolic slowdown is across both men and women. So it is very common, and it's one of the leading drivers, but of course it's not the only thing. But interestingly, and I don't know if you will know about this, but insulin resistance is bad for clitoral sensitivity.
Get out of town. No, I'd
Yeah,
definitely.
check your face out. Yeah. So if you have insulin resistance, the likelihood that you will have reduced sensation, clitoral sensation, there is a correlation there. So that's another, people report decreased sexual satisfaction during that time of their life, which is very complicated, and we'll touch on that as well. But reduced sensation and orgasm being harder to achieve is one of the reasons that people cite. So easy ways to easy wins for insulin resistance, I should say, is making sure you eat breakfast before 10 a.m. and making sure that your breakfast contains 30 grams of crude protein is probably the most important thing I think that you can do. And then similarly, not eating late into the evening either. So figuring out by 6 or 7 if you can stop eating, that is really beneficial because there is a relationship between melatonin and insulin. So as melatonin rises at the end of the day to help prepare us for sleep, it has an effect on the cells in the pancreas that secrete insulin. It sort of switches them off because the body's starting to do that handover between active day processing, digesting, and then, the things that it does for us in the nighttime when we sleep. So when we eat later into the night, we're asking our body to produce insulin when it's not really designed to. Yeah. So it has kind of like
ready
an
for bed.
Yeah. Precisely. So it has an impaired ability to perform that task. So snacking late into the evening is not fantastic. So making sure you're eating a protein-rich breakfast before 10 a.m. and then not eating and snacking on the couch late into the evening are two really good things that you can do to help combat insulin resistance. And then making sure that each meal you eat has about 30 grams of protein in it, that sustained release throughout the day, is also important.
And what's that sort of the equivalent of, like 3 eggs, or like give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, there's heaps of really nifty calculators out there. I'm going to go like ballpark for you because I can only remember a couple off the top of my head. Lentils or chickpeas, you need about 250 grams to get about 30 grams of protein, whereas you'd need, as you say, about 2 or 3 eggs to get 30 grams of protein. Depends on the size of the egg. Yep. So white fish, kangaroo can be pretty close gram for gram, gram of the substance to protein content. That's a very complicated way of saying what I was trying to say. So something people need to be aware of is that if you have 100 grams of chicken, that's not 100 grams of protein. 100 grams of chicken breast probably has about 30 grams of protein in it. So when you are getting your protein from plant sources, you're going to need to eat a lot more. So just be mindful of that. But you can even just punch into Google, protein content.
Totally.
You can search it up pretty easily.
Beautiful. Amazing. Okay. So we've covered the kind of like insulin resistance, weight gain. Like, are there any other sort of, are we more susceptible to any other particular diseases or things like that we should be aware of in menopause, or shall we kind of move on to, I really want to talk about the common treatments, and there's some quite medical ones, which I'd love to hear your thoughts on, like the hormone replacement therapy and DHEA and these sort of common ones. But I'm just going to let you like steer it in case we've missed anything before we head there.
And this is why I had notes, Freya. Because, there are. So peri-menopause is a classic time for the emergence of autoimmune conditions, and it's because of reverse puberty. The body is restructuring itself, and as a consequence, it kind of opens the door for these things to start to flare up. So I'm going to answer that question very briefly, which is yes, keep an eye out for autoimmune conditions. That's things like thyroid disease, hyper or hypothyroid disease, fibromyalgia, some people suggest, might actually be linked to the menopausal transition because, again, you see a lot of women in that age group. Gallbladder disease can be quite common at that time as well, so keeping an eye out for any signs of gallbladder issue, which some of the weird ones are like there's a pain behind the shoulder blade. People have that, that's a referral pattern for gallbladder pain. And then, one of the more obvious ones, of course, in menopause is osteoporosis. And that is down to, yet again, the effect that estrogen has on the bones as well. And that's why weight training and making sure that you're eating enough vitamin D eating enough vitamin D. Getting enough vitamin D through either through supplementation. It is in some foods, but either through supplementation or safe sun exposure. And a lot of people in that age bracket are on a calcium and vitamin D supplement. And I don't see any problem with that at all.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So before we wrap up, we'll definitely give a few tips and strategies to kind of protect ourselves from these things. But right now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the classic hormone replacement or the DHEA or what's the other main, these things that the medical system will usually throw at people through menopause. Can they actually be helpful? Are they? I mean, I'm quite skeptical often of how quickly we reach for pharmaceuticals and things like that. What are your thoughts on these sorts of interventions for menopause?
So speaking of nervous system training, I've just taken several deep breaths so that I don't get shrill because I think, what I'm seeing is that there is a bit of a trend at the moment. I'll use that word. There's a trend at the moment I have to go back further than that. So old school hormone replacement therapy was pretty shit because it was not applied in a beneficial way. It used a synthetic hormone that was made out of horse piss, the urine from pregnant mares, and it was given to women who still had uteruses without any progesterone to balance the effect. And estrogen has a proliferative effect on the endometrial tissue, and what we saw was without that progesterone, that's the whole thing, right? The yin and yang, the body operates in balance. If you just give a woman with a uterus estrogen, the lining of her uterus will begin to thicken and grow and those cells will proliferate. And then in many cases, it turned into an endometrial cancer. It was linked to breast cancer as well. And so they were like, hormone replacement therapy is super dangerous. We're not going to do it anymore. So now what we have is kind of a reemergence of hormone therapy that uses products, pharmaceuticals, that have been synthesized from natural sources like yams. And when you look at them, the molecular structure of them, they are identical to the structure of your body's natural hormones. So with the synthetic hormones, they're not identical. They look so close that the body's like, that's pretty close. That'll do. And this is why xenoestrogens are able to be disruptive. So you've talked about that a lot in the work that you do. Environmental toxins and fragrances are a classic one for having these compounds in them that look very much like your body's natural estrogen. And so your body encounters it and goes, I'll use that. That's pretty similar, but of course has disastrous consequences. So the hormone therapy that we use these days is identical to your body and so is much, much safer. But it's not, I believe, I'm sort of seeing a trend of it being put forward now in a similar way to I think we put the pill forward as just the cure for everybody. And it's super simple. You've got these. Yeah. And it's just your natural hormones are declining. Well, we'll just give you your natural hormones again in the form of a patch or a gel or, just take those. Super safe, no problem. And you won't have to worry about it. But there's some issues with that. One, I want to say first of all as well that I'm actually a fan of hormone therapy for the right individual. And I think that as part of a total healthcare plan, a holistic approach, that we should definitely be giving women this option because it can be nothing short of, life-changing. And not to downplay how serious things can get during reverse puberty. And I don't know if I have to add a trigger warning here, but I'll be mentioning death. There are recorded cases of women who have thrown themselves off buildings because of their hormone. Yeah, because they went to their doctor and they said, I've got all these problems. And the doctor was like, well, you're depressed. And she was like, I'm not depressed, but I'm not right. And it led to them taking their own life. And I think, well, probably hormone replacement, menopausal hormone therapy might have been indicated, right? Because there were these severe and debilitating implications to someone's mental health. Definitely get that shit in there. But then, you need to work it as part of a total health assessment, like you and I have been talking about. Is she working 80 hours a week at the law firm? Does she have any support at home? Is she exercising? What's she eating? You know, we need to make sure that everything else is in place as well. And then you can only, I think the current recommendation is to only be on these medications for about 5 years. So after 5 years, what then? You know, if you haven't, if these products can be used as a way to soften the transition, you know, but they're not something that you're going to take right up until the end of your life. And then I also hear so testosterone is a great example. There's a lot of women in, you know, I'm pretty active in the Facebook groups in this age group, chatting to people, helping where I can, hearing what they're saying. And one thing that I hear a lot of is that their sex drive is completely tanked. And then, you know, people are like, oh, I get on the testosterone. It really worked for me. And that's great. But then for every 10 women that say testosterone was life-changing, you got 2 or 3 that were like, well, I tried it and it was horrible and I had to stop it immediately. So it's not for everyone. Nothing is for everyone. And then DHEA, I think that's the one you were thinking of. That's a precursor to estrogen and testosterone. It's pretty cool. It has anti-aging benefits, and it can help with things like desire, arousal, possibly orgasm as well. So we sort of, you'll get prescribed DHEA and testosterone together often, but it comes with a host of side effects, you know, or potential side effects as well. So whilst it has the potential to be super helpful, it can also have so many side effects as to negate, you know, the benefit that it brings. And I think we need to be very excited about this area of medicine, but also realistic about who it's for, how helpful it's going to be. Some women it does help, but it takes ages to get the dose right. You have to fiddle with the dose a bit. And then once you fiddled with the dose and got the dose right, then maybe the dose changes because, you know, this is a transition out of reproduction. So then, you know, you can just get stable and then plus supply and demand as well. So there's plenty of women I've spoken to who are like, I can't get my patch at the moment. I'm freaking out. I'm ready to fucking murder someone because they're falling off this cliff. You know, they've been replacing the body's natural hormones and everything's been great. And then suddenly they can't get their script filled and bam, it's like no estrogen. And the bounce back from that is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess like with all of this stuff, I see it as it's a tool and it's not for everyone and it's not for every situation or time, but it can be helpful. It should be, in my mind, used as a last resort once you've exhausted all the other kind of more lifestyle related factors and natural kind of treatment approaches, because I just feel like it's we reach for it way too quickly and it's used as a bit of a band-aid solution with a lot of pharmaceuticals and things. So I suppose just making sure you're approaching it holistically and not shying away from using it and not shaming anyone that does need to use it, but knowing that it's not for everyone and it's not supposed to be a permanent solution. It's more of a bridge to help ease the transition, and that ideally, like, the goal is to not need it, I suppose. Would you kind of agree with that?
I think you just summed that up beautifully.
Thank you. Okay, so
I wish I could speak with such concise accuracy rather than taking everyone on such a wild ride.
It's very rare that I manage to nail such a succinct kind of wrap up. But well,
you did.
I mean,
we're
beautiful. The same.
It was beautiful.
Thanks, babe. So I really want to get a TMI story out of you, and then if we've got time, I would love to touch upon the impact of this phase on relationships, and in particular romantic relationships and primary partnerships, things like that. Because it's, it definitely, I think that there was this, maybe you were telling me there's this statistic that a lot more divorces happen around menopause, and it can be, divorces that are really necessary, and someone just has probably needed to break up with their partner for a long time, but it's not until menopause that hormone of what did Jane? It was like the hormone of
service and sacrifice, something along those lines.
I thought there was another word too. Anyway, it disappears, and all of a sudden you're like, what the fuck am I doing in this unhappy relationship?
Yeah.
but then I feel like
I think what she said was you're not willing to take shit anymore. So whatever nice word that she used is like you're just not willing to take any shit anymore.
Yeah, and then I reckon there's probably plenty of relationships that are worth saving and could be saved if, we kind of understood what was going on hormonally and how that kind of influenced, behavior, and how to communicate. So we can get into that before we wrap up.
Excuse the interruption, my loves, but I'm shamelessly seeking reviews and 5-star ratings for the potty because, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, it's pretty fab. And the more people who get to hear it, the more people it can help. Reviews and ratings help me curry favour with the algorithmic gods and get suggested to other listeners to check out. Plus, they make me feel really good and appreciated as I continue to pour my heart and soul into creating this baby for you. And I promise I don't mazz over them or anything. I mostly just tuck them away for a rainy day when I'm filled with self-doubt and existential dread about being self-employed, which is fairly frequently. So you see, leaving a review really does make a difference, and it's an easy little act of support that you can take in just a minute or two by either going to Spotify and leaving 5 stars for the show or writing a written review and leaving 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts. Choose your poison, or if you're a real overachiever, you could do both. Whoa now. If you are writing a review though, just be sure to only use G-rated words because despite the fact that this is a podcast about sexuality, words like sex can be censored and your review won't actually show up. Lame. Anyway, oh, what was that? Oh, you're going to go do it right now while I wait. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a great idea. May as well just quickly click that 5-star button before we get on with it and, forget about it and get on with your day. I'm hearing them roll in. I'm hearing those 5 stars. Oh my God, I make myself cringe. Anyway, thank you muchly. You're a total gem, and I'll let you get back to the episode now.
But for now, do you have another TMI story? We didn't do get pregnant and die. You've been on the podcast so many times now. Let's just roll out a TMI story.
TMI, we love it. TMI, we love it.
I know you.
I honestly thought that I might actually be able to get out of both because I was like, I've done 2, but then I listened to your other podcasts and I was like, she's definitely going to ask me for one. So I
mean, it's my favorite bit.
I know, amazing. And I actually shared this story on the internet recently, and I thought it was like just a funny anecdote, but I didn't realize how it made a lot of people laugh. It brought a lot of people joy. So I'm going to tell it. It was in response to someone was horrified to find out that a lot of girls flush tampons. And they're like, you can't do that. It blocks up toilets. And think of the poor plumber who has to go in there up to his shoulder to remove it or her shoulder to remove it. And she was like, do you flush tampons? And I was like, well, I've never flushed a tampon. But the other day I removed a tampon and wrapped it in some toilet paper, as one does. And I was upstairs in the house here, and I live in the tropics, and so you don't want to put menstrual products in the bin too long because they do definitely start to develop an odor when you live in a warm, humid environment. You pretty much got to get those guys straight in the outside bin. And so I wrapped it up and I was headed down the stairs to put it in the bin. And then I remembered, my 11-year-old daughter, I've got to wash her dance uniform because she's got dancing. So I went into her bedroom, and children don't put things away. So, of course, I'm like, where has she hurled this dance uniform? And she is my my eldest daughter, and my youngest daughter will actually sort of put her clothes in order a little bit, but my eldest daughter just takes things off and I think tries to throw them as far away from each other as possible. So I'm trying to find her uniform, and I put this wrapped tampon down on her dresser and, of course, promptly forgot about it, right? So I picked up all the dance clothes, gone downstairs to wash them. I want to say as well here that my children are probably better educated about female reproductive health than a lot of adults, So they know all about periods, they know all about tampons, they know about fertility, and all about the stuff. And so anyway, she comes home from school later and I'm like, hey, babe, you've got to go up and get changed. Go get changed and then come downstairs and I'll make you a snack. She's gone for ages and I'm like, I better go and find out what she's doing because she does have a tendency to vague off as well. So I've gone in to her room and I find her in a staring competition with this tampon, which by now the blood has like started to seep
So
through the top,
true.
right? She's looking at it. And I'm like, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I put that down in here earlier. I forgot to put it in the bin. And she looks at me and she goes, what is it? And I said to her,
A finger?
I said to her, it's just a tampon that I used before. And she looked so visibly relieved. I was like,
Totally.
what did you think it was? And of course, she knows all about this stuff, but she's never seen a dirty sanitary or used sanitary product before. And so just like you, her little mind went to, must be a severed finger.
Totally. I mean, what else could it be, honestly?
Whose fingers do you think
Mum's
I'm
a
chopping
psycho.
off?
Oh, that would have been horrifying. Wow, I love
Oh,
that.
it's so funny. But this is, when she learned it was a tampon, she was like, oh, that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
but just, oh dear. So that's my TMI story.
Fuck yeah, I love that. And it kind of like makes me think of an episode that'll be coming out soon with Dr. Tina Sellers about shameless parenting. And we talk about how to have the sex talk with your kids. And her thing is like, have hundreds of little talks. There's no like one birds and the bees chat. It's like having so many talks that by the time they get up to a point, so like you'd obviously already chatted about periods, menstrual products, you'd prepared her. She wasn't unfamiliar with these themes. So all you had to do was say, it's not a severed finger, it's a tampon. And she's like, oh, okay. Rather than like, it's not a severed finger, but also I have to tell you this thing that vaginas do. And then go through this whole like horrifying realization that she had never, do you know what I mean? So she was already prepared. So well done.
And I want to add to that. I know this is going off topic a bit, but I just want to throw in there as a parent, don't think, oh, well, I'll postpone these conversations. I'll have them a bit later. Because once your kids hit school, you are only as good as the shittest parent in that class. Because you may have sheltered your children from violent video games or talks about sex or anything, but you have to parent as though they're going to go to school with someone whose parents are just hopeless. Because, I actually heard something from Lily that she'd heard from a friend. I don't want to be all cryptic or anything. I'm not going to go into it. But yeah, a friend of hers had an experience and had talked to Lily about it. And it was through this conversation about the severed finger that then we started talking about other stuff. And she's like, oh yeah, because my friend and tells me the story, and we were able to have a chat about it. And I was like, whoa, babe, how did you feel about that? She goes, well, you and I had spoken about some stuff. So yes, it is so important. It's so important to talk to your kids. And also, if you haven't set, and this segues into relationship communication, so I found a way to make it work. If you haven't had those small conversations when they're little, when they get to that age of 12, 13, when they're naturally, from an anthropological point of view, starting to pull away from you so that they can individuate and become separate from the family unit, they can go out and make their way in the world, this is why teenagers think you're stupid, because if they thought you had all the answers forever, they would never want to fly from the nest. And so if you're then going to sit down with a 13-year-old and be like, hey, we should talk about sex, they're just going to be like, oh, gross. Like, what kind of drugs have you been smoking while I'm at school? So it's all of these little conversations that you have along the way. And similarly, when you're in a relationship and then you're heading into reverse puberty, if you guys have had a good relationship up to that point, or you've been able to have fights and stuff and realize that you could possibly communicate a little bit better, but get through it because your hormones stabilize, you may find that the lid gets lifted on all of that during perimenopause, because I hear so many stories about women who the rage just takes over and they scream and they say things to one woman was like, she left the house because she couldn't stop just these horrible things coming out of her mouth. So she left the house, and then she was, typing this message in the car. She's like, I'm too ashamed to go back and face him. I can't believe the things that came out of my mouth. I know, right? Bless.
Yeah.
So being able to communicate in a healthy way with your partner, first of all, being able to give them a heads up and be like, I might act a bit crazy, and I'm not crazy. It's just that I'm going through a second puberty To have that line of communication open so that the man understands what's going on. Because I think so much of it's shrouded in secrecy, right? It's taboo still to talk about.
Yeah.
So understanding, having your partner, I've said man, but obviously partner, I believe the dynamic could be very different when you've got two women going through it. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Absolutely.
But certainly letting men know,
really.
letting husbands, yes, true.
Letting like having a period at the same time.
Oh. Yeah, no.
Blessing and a curse, I imagine.
I can imagine.
Yeah, go on.
I was just saying that looking into positive ways to communicate, again, before you need those tactics and strategies. And one, I said this was going to be some practical advice in this episode, and one great thing I can recommend is the 5 love languages. Do you know about that?
Yeah. It's really handy to know just because it gives you a bit of an insight into how the other person works and how you can communicate your love to them and how you can receive it as well. So, yeah, do you want to give people a quick rundown?
I think that's a really good place to start because it's a good way, if you went to your partner out of the blue, I was like, hey, I think we should talk about really good communication strategies for this relationship, or hey, let's go to counseling together just to see how each other ticks. You know, it might raise some red flags, but you can do this fun. It's a free online, and obviously like anything, you can go into it in a lot more detail. I think there's like a paywall for that, but you can do the free quiz online. And I think there's 5 love languages. And I feel like we might have even talked about this before on a different podcast, but basically they're things like quality time, words, you know, so
words of affirmation.
I love you, words of affirmation. Do you know them?
Yeah.
List them off.
Acts of service, physical touch, and there's one more. What have I already covered? And
gifts of appreciation.
Oh,
gifts of appreciation. Yeah, I'm gonna.
Gifts. Yeah.
I was about to say, I'm going to guarantee that that's not one of your love languages because I always forget the ones that aren't mine. Aren't mine. But my husband and I have opposite ones. So I am, it's kind of embarrassing, but I am all about gifts of appreciation and acts of service. So I just like people to do stuff for me and buy me presents. Whereas my husband is such a nicer person than I am. He likes physical touch and words of affirmation. So he likes me to say, I really love you, and give him a cuddle. Whereas I'm like, I did the dishes. Can't you tell how much I love you? Because in my love language, you know, doing the dishes is an act of service for the other person. And so that's a really great place to start. It's also a fun place to start. And then from there, another resource that I would recommend is the work of Esther Perel on, again, this is why the love languages one is a good place to start, because Esther Perel is best known for her work on infidelity, but actually she is a fabulous expert on just relational intelligence as well. So you can go and listen to some of her podcasts. I think she has a masterclass these days, if anyone has a masterclass membership. She's got heaps of stuff online on YouTube. She's done TED Talks and stuff. So she's really a great resource as well for figuring out how to interact in a relationship and communicate in a healthy and positive way.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's just so important, like the communication piece, and also like, discovering little things like the love languages to help you understand how the other person works, to help you understand how you work, how you give and receive love, because they might be different from one another. And so you're kind of like ships passing in the night, and you think that you're, you know, expressing your love, but the other person's not receiving it, and what they're doing to express their love isn't landing for you. And so there's this kind of frustration and isolation that comes from not understanding that. So doing things that help you understand one another better, and obviously communication's like the number one, and I'm constantly banging on about it, but also like approaching it all from a standpoint of like, it's not me against them. I'm not having this experience and I'm fucking pissed off at them for not getting it, and being more supportive. It's like, okay, like let's get on the same team. Let's let our partners in on the experience and be vulnerable and be like, I'm a bit scared. I'm a bit all over the place. This is new territory for me. I'm feeling really strange and unusual. I'm having different sorts of like behavior kind of appearing in my like day to day, and that's that's impacting the relationship, and like I want to chat about how we can navigate this together, and like, can I get your buy-in? Can I count on you to be on my side and to like stand by me if things get a bit crunchy? And if they do, like, I'm also open to hearing your feedback and your experience so that we can make sure that, we're kind of traversing this together in a really loving, kind of thoughtful way. And that's like any relationship, any stage would benefit from that, of course. But I think we probably can't just coast along ignoring things and sweeping them under the rug anymore. And that's why stuff comes to a head, because the hormones desert us. Shit gets very real, and all of a sudden any kind of rose-colored glasses that we may have been enjoying are whipped off. And it's a stark kind of landscape that is in front of you all of a sudden. And so I think a lot of relationships don't survive that, and some aren't supposed to. That's probably a good catalyst for some breakups that needed to happen. But then some, could actually ride that out if we had the tools and if we really like put the energy and the effort into that.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And that's that then brings us to the last point really, which is another thing that I encounter when I speak to these women, is that there's this huge disparity between the amount of sex that they feel like having and they want to have, and the amount of sex that their partner wants to have. And I will say as well, because I don't want it to sound like all doom and gloom, I see a fair few posts where people are like, I'm kind of hesitant to post this because I can see that a lot of people are struggling with their sex drive, but I am just horny all the time. Like, what the hell? I don't want my husband to think that I'm a crazy nympho. And I'm like, I don't think any husband of yours is going to worry. But it can go the other way. So you can actually get an increase in sex drive at this time of life. But commonly people say that they're really not interested in sex. And so that is almost like the cherry on the evil sundae that you were just talking about. You've got this, the hormones aren't there for you to just smooth things over and, shut your mouth and keep on going, or not even shut your mouth. Just let that one go through to the keeper, and go about your business. Plus then you've got these surges and changes in hormones, no good communication skills, no nervous system regulation, so you can't just stop in the moment before you scream horrible things and take a deep breath, because you don't have that muscle memory. And then the sexual dynamic in the relationship is off as well. So it's like this perfect storm. And it was Jane who quoted that statistic at you. You were saying before that there's a disproportionately high number of divorces in that perimenopausal, menopausal age group. It's about 60% from memory is what she said. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty high. So I kind of want to bat the ball back to you a little bit about this. I feel like this is more your area when it comes to, there's a couple of concepts. So I read, and I recommend this book to everybody, Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. Is that her surname? Yeah. And she talks about some fundamental concepts in there that are the brakes and the accelerator to sex. And what is the other one that I was thinking about? Oh, yes. Spontaneous.
Yeah.
Spontaneous and responsive arousal and desire. So do you want to touch on that quickly, and then I can round out with talking about some of the physical things that can change, because the body does change, and you might need to, like use lube for the first time, or there might be some supplements that you can take to help with your vaginal health. And I can finish on that note, but I'd really love to hear from you on those two areas, because I think they're playing more of a role, particularly that brakes and accelerator, than any kind of hormonal intervention.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. It's like there's this kind of, we debunk a few of these misconceptions and myths in the other menopause episodes, because I feel as though it's blown way out of proportion that like you lose your sex drive when you're in menopause and and of course it can go in that direction. But what I would say is like it's probably more about the lifestyle factors, and those would be impacting your libido more than menopause itself, and how you're experiencing menopause is so influenced by those other factors, that of course, your libido gets caught up in that, because they're very similar, the kinds of factors that will impact your experience of menopause and your experience of your libido. And I feel like I've covered, so I did a whole episode on libido, with Eliza Rossi. Like, you should definitely, it's another one you should go back and listen to, everyone. And we kind of went into more depth on that. I sort of feel like, just given that we're kind of running out of time, I don't want to go too deeply into libido factors just because like it's a whole other topic. But I will just say like it's really not so much the menopause that's responsible. There's underlying factors, and yeah, like, you know, we have different kinds of arousal, spontaneous versus responsive. The majority of women have responsive arousal, which means that we don't just automatically feel like a horn bag and get turned on really easily and want to have sex without some kind of sexually relevant stimuli that actually, sparks some interest and then arousal sort of responds to. And so
I
often
think
we think we've got low libidos.
So I was going to say, a lot of women are waiting to feel horny to have sex, but actually they need to begin to engage in sex in order to feel horny.
Totally. Yeah.
Kind of
So we think we have like low libidos or we're not interested in sex, but actually it's just because we have responsive arousal as our default kind of arousal pattern. And we need some sexy kind of nice feeling things to be happening before our arousal processes kick in. And then we can feel horny, and that will kind of like, we can ride that wave. But that's why we might not initiate sex as often, because we don't have that spontaneous desire to have sex and that horniness that's kind of fueling us to initiate, like a lot of men do. And the majority of men kind of have spontaneous arousal. And, you know, that's just rule of thumb. Like, it's different for everyone and it can change throughout our lives. And lifestyle factors really do influence libido. But I'd highly recommend listening to the libido episode if you want to delve more into that. And the other, in the other menopause episodes, there was some, I can't remember the exact study or stats that I cited, but I did a bit more research for those ones, and kind of talked about how we all think that we lose our libido and sex drive in menopause, but the stats around sexual satisfaction and frequency and all of these kind of things are actually not, like, they don't plummet. They actually don't drop in menopause. We think that they do. And, you know, there might be newer studies now. I'm going to just fudge this. Go back and listen to the other episodes. I swear I was more prepared. But I do mention some studies that are like, hey, actually sexual satisfaction is just as high, if not higher, after you've gone through menopause. And there's a number of reasons for this that we talk about in those episodes. So yeah, I kind of think that it's like menopause is the scapegoat. We're blaming it for all of this stuff, but actually all of those things are due to our choices and our lifestyle factors that would be creating those issues anyway with, and we're just not buoyed up anymore by the hormones that might mask the fact that these lifestyle factors are influencing us. And so you're just kind of left with what's there and what your lifestyle factors are actually doing to your desire, I suppose. I think that's all I kind of want to say on that. Big topic though.
Yeah, massive. And that's what I was going to say in terms of actionable steps for that particular. I think I wanted to talk about it, to throw it in the mix, because I wanted to highlight it as something that I see commonly where people are like, I don't want to have sex anymore. It must be the menopause or it must be peri. And I'm like, no, I mean, like, it's part of a bigger picture, but it's more likely that you've just spent all week running around after a husband and family, or your boss is a jerk, or whatever it happens to be. And so sex is the last thing on your mind, would be, even if you weren't going through menopause.
Well, that's it. That's what I was going to say. Sorry to cut you off. I was like, there was something else I wanted to mention. We don't feel like having sex when we're stressed, when there's like big transitions happening, when there's lots of change and like things are tumultuous, or, there's so many things that are happening at that stage in life that are not to do with menopause, but more to do with, like, you were saying, like, you've got aging parents, more people are dying around you, there's maybe money stress, there's like, your kids are leaving home, and there's just so much change and things are so transitory that, of course, sex is the last thing on your mind. And then, of course, the kind of procreation-driven urges have disappeared as well, because you're not going to, you're not fertile anymore and you're not going to procreate. So even though that's not why you were having sex, like, biologically your body's a little bit less motivated to have sex.
Definitely. It has to, there's another motivation that you have to look for at that time. And that's again covered in the episode that you did with not Jane. It was with
Heidi, yeah.
Heidi. So I'm sure you'll link these in the show notes, but I would say that in terms of actionable steps for this particular topic, if a listener feels that their sex drive is waning, whether you're in peri or not, go check out the libido episode that you did, the episode with Heidi. And then I recommend that book, Come As You Are, by Emily Nagoski.
Awesome
That's
book.
a fantastic resource as well. So
Hey, me again. If you'd like to support the potty and you've already given it 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on, I want to mention that you can buy some really dope merch from the website and get yourself a Labia Lounge tote, tee, togs. Yep, you heard that right. I even have Labia Lounge bathers. Or a cute fanny pack if that'd blow your hair back. So if fashion isn't your passion, though, you can donate to my Buy Me a Coffee donation page, which is actually called Buy Me a Soy Chai Latte, because I'll be the first to admit I'm a bit of a Melbourne cafe tosser like that. And yes, that is my coffee order. You can do a once-off donation or an ongoing membership and sponsor me for as little as 3 fat ones a month. And I also have a Sunroom profile over on the Sunroom app, as I've mentioned. And I also offer one-on-one coaching and online courses that'll help you level up your sex life and relationship with yourself and others in a really big way. So every bit helps, because it ain't cheap to put out a sweet podcast into the world every week out of my own pocket. So I will be undyingly grateful if you support me and my biz financially in any of these ways. And if you like, I'll even give you a mental BJ with my mind from the lounge itself. Saucy. I'll pop the links in the show notes. Thank you. Later.
However, that being said, estrogen is a fabulous hormone, and it does have an impact on vaginal health. And as the levels of estrogen decline, we can see some issues cropping up in that area. One of them is the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, which is a really bad, I hope they used to call it vaginal atrophy, which was terrible. Now they've come up with GSM, which I think is equally terrible because it's so vague. You're like, what is that? Unless you know a little bit about anatomy, you'd be like, huh? And that is an umbrella term that encompasses things like an increase in recurrent UTIs, pain with intercourse, vaginal atrophy. So you can have pain with intercourse, or you can just have pain generally walking around, inflammation of the tissues in that area. Increased instances of bacterial vaginosis, which is where the pH balance of the vagina shifts. And again, you can check out the episode that you and I did on thrush, UTIs, and BV as well for more information there.
Yeah.
But these are very real things that people have to deal with, but they're not insurmountable. So what the key takeaway I'll give people is daily moisturizing of those tissues. Jane touched on this, that people go, oh, dry vagina. Your vagina is going to dry up. And I loved her analogy. She was like, no, put your finger inside your mouth, right? Like, it's not dry in there. Vagina's the same. What happens is that because of the effect of estrogen on the tissues of the vagina, they become less plump. And so you're a little bit more prone to tearing, and, there can be some issues around that. So moisturizing as you do your face every day, we're like, oh, I don't want that to get a little bit, less plump. So we're spending a fortune on our face. Just a daily vaginal moisturizer as well. The Yes brand do a good one. There's also one called Olive and Bee. You need to be careful with the types of products that you're using down there. They need to have the right pH and be very, people like coconut oil, so much coconut oil. I'm like, no, it's so antimicrobial. Some people can tolerate it, but it's not my first go-to. I do like emu oil for that, but I think, the Olive and Bee and the Yes brand are 2 really good commercially
Cacao
available.
butter's great.
Yep. So daily moisturizing was shown in certain studies to be as effective as vaginal application of estrogen. So it's just a case of helping those tissues out the same way we do with our face that is exposed to the sun. So a daily moisturizer. Sea buckthorn oil as a supplement can be very good for the tissues of the vagina. People might find that taking a women's specific strain probiotic in Australia, there's the LifeSpace Women's, which is a good one. And they have strains that are beneficial to vaginal health, so they can help kind of ward off those instances of bacterial vaginosis that can crop up, and yeast infections as well. So I won't say too much more there because, as you know, I'm not a massive fan of people self-prescribing. But if you do have any of those sort of issues, the genitourinary syndrome of menopause is a progressive condition. So that means it's not, if you are experiencing symptoms, they're not just going to magically go away. They will continue to worsen. So it's really in your best interest to speak to someone who has the expertise in that area, and never underestimate the importance of lube.
Totally. And like I make a homemade lube. We're going to launch it soon, actually. And there's this kind of product I've been making that are like little yoni pearls that are kind of like suppositories. So you pop them up your vagina, they hydrate, they kind of moisturize the tissues, but then they also lubricate. So you can use them daily just for like, vaginal mucosal membrane thinning and vaginal dryness or whatever. But you can also use it as a lube. So, and there's products like that out there on the market. Mine are not currently on the market, but if you did want some, you could contact me and I'm sure I could whip up a batch. But yeah, yoni pearls that are like specially formulated for postmenopausal and perimenopausal women are really great. And they don't have any like rubbish in them.
We have some beautiful ones that Chinese medicine practitioners like myself make up, because you can infuse them with herbs as well. And so they can be really, and we use as the base for that pessary, the cacao butter.
Oh yeah, pessary. I called it a suppository. Pessary.
Yeah, pessary is in the front, suppositories in the back.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that was me on track. Holy shit. I'm sorry, guys.
No, we've gone a bit over time. We were really trying to put a time limit on it this time, but fuck, I mean, they're big topics and, so many tangents, so many throwbacks to other episodes in this one. God damn it. Thank you so much, Joanna. Fucking amazing. I always love chatting to you, and you're just a wealth of knowledge. So hopefully this provided people with some insights and some tangible, practical little tips that they can start applying. Did you have anything you want to leave people with, or anything that you've got online available at the moment we want to direct people to in terms of your work?
I would love it if people would jump on my email list, actually, because I was thinking, Freya's probably going to sweetly ask me if I've got a nice resource for people in perimenopause. And I actually, the old like one-pager top 5 this. I actually don't have anything prepared for peri. I've got a good sleep one. If anyone who is in perimenopause is struggling with sleep, you can go to my website and download the sleep one, because that will be really good to tell you everything you need to get in place first before you then go and look at, sleeping tablets or whatever it happens to be. So that's a relevant download that will then pop you on my mailing list. But you can go to the homepage of my website, joannamac.com, and sign up for my email newsletter. And I really do – that's the thing I'm most consistent on, because I enjoy writing. I've only just kind of started – becoming consistent because I set all of it up pre-pandemic, and then I moved to Mexico and blah, blah, blah. But that's the thing that I really enjoy, and I commit to sending an email every Sunday for me, so it's Monday for your side of the world.
Cool.
And it has extra stuff, I don't just link to all the things that I've put up online. It's got extra stuff in it. And you can also follow me online on Instagram. I'm Joanna_McMeikan. I'm just double checking that you can, so you can sign up to if you go to the homepage of my website, scroll down the bottom, it's the monthly newsletter, sign up there. And that's where I reckon I direct people this time.
Beauty. Well, I'll put those links in the show notes as well, so it's just easy for people to click straight through to your website. Definitely follow Joanna on Insta as well. And thanks for sticking with us this long if you've gotten this far. And that's it, darling hearts. Thank you for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. And in the meantime, if you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch, because that, my dear, is a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism. And you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify, and destigmatize with this here podcast. Also, I'm always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, or guest suggestions. So feel free to get in touch via my website at freyagraph.com or say hey over on Insta. My handle is Freya_graph_YMT, and I seriously hope you're following me on there, because damn, we have fun. We have fun. Anyway, later labial legends. I'll see you next time.